Tammi Arender is a news personality, anchor, and storyteller. She's an anchor and reporter for RFD-TV, the Agriculture Network. She's also a contributor to Tennessee Roads and RFD-TV. She's a producer and actress known for Flag of My Father, Pitch Perfect 2, and Enemies Among Us. We are thrilled to have her join us here at Volunteer State Community College.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. It is an absolute honor to be here. It's so interesting to watch. I put my life together in that little minute and a half reel, and it's like, wow, I did that? And it's like TV and radio both, they give you opportunities to do things, to meet people, have experiences that I feel like no other industry gives you the chance to do. And it's one of the reasons I wanted to go into it. Now, I grew up in a little town in Louisiana called Tallulah. And I was raised on a farm, soybean cotton farm, and that is why I'm at the Agriculture Network today, which gets into 42 million homes. We don't have 42 million eyeballs on us because my dad, who was a farmer, used to say, you don't care what I do for a living unless you eat or wear clothes. Everybody cares about agriculture. So about 11 years ago, I was actually working at WSMV. And one of the producers quit to go to work at RFD-TV. And I said, what in the world is RFD-TV? And they said, it's the Agriculture Network. So I literally stalked the owner of that network till I got a job. Because I was not a traditional reporter. I didn't have that investigative gene. You know, I mean, 60 Minutes was never going to be looking for me, or Dateline. I was the storyteller. I was the feature story person. I wanted to tug on your heartstrings. But you still had to be a reporter. You still had to ask who, what, why, when, and where. Everybody familiar with that? You got to ask that. And for me, the most important part of that, and one of the main reasons I went into being a reporter and anchor, is I always wanted to know the why. Because the why is why we do what we do. You know, you want to know what moves somebody to do the job that they do and what makes them tick. And I want to know that. And so I decided, especially since my mother had prayed, Lord, I hope she gets paid for talking, then I said, you know what, that's what I'm going to do. And so I was a sophomore in college at the University of Louisiana in Monroe, tiny little town, small market, and it had one TV station at the time. And this was at a time you could walk into the TV station. You didn't have to be buzzed in, because now every TV station's Fort Knox, because people are crazy, right? And so, but back then you could literally just walk in. And at the time, I actually wanted to do sports. I was a football fanatic, and I loved to play basketball and tennis, so I thought, oh, I want to do sports. Well, you have to understand, I'm old as dirt. We didn't have ESPN. You didn't have women in sports. So, of course, the sports director kicked me, and he said, you just need to go see the news director. And literally that day, as a sophomore in college, I looked at that news director and I said, this is what I can do, what I want to do, and you're going to let me do it. He had a cigarette in his mouth, which you can't do today. And he looked at me and he said, I don't know why I'm hiring you, but I am. And that leads me to the very point of what I want to make today. I called 3 of my mentors yesterday before I came to speak to you guys, because I wanted to make sure that in my 44 years in this business, what still makes a news director want to hire you? What is it? What's the difference between 44 years ago and today? You know what? You know what he told me? You know what? My main mentor, who now, he is Emmy Award winning, Edward R. Murrow. He teaches around the world. He teaches journalism around the world. He used to be the news director at WSMV, and he became my mentor. He said, I want somebody who is enthusiastic about what they're doing, that they're passionate about what they're doing. Because you know what? If you sign up to do a job and you don't like it, it's just all stress. You sign up to do a job you love and want to do, it's called passion. It's a big difference. So in this particular world of radio and TV, and I didn't include that in my little clip of my little montage of the things I do, I also voice track a radio show. for a station in Monroe, and I do voiceover work because, again, technology allows us to do that, right? So I do a radio show for Monroe, Louisiana, sitting in my living room in Nashville, Tennessee. But that's the same thing. I'm passionate about it because everybody says, why, you already work about 10 hours a day. Why would you add that to your plate? Because I have passion for it. And I want to do it. I feel like, and it's a Christian radio station, so I feel like I'm making a difference. It's not just, oh, that was Lainey Wilson and here's Luke Combs. It's a Christian radio station, so I can give a message. I can encourage people and not get in trouble for it. What I really want to drive home for you today, in that after talking to my mentor yesterday, and then I also called the news director at WTVF, the CBS station here. She's a friend of mine, and for several years I did some feature reports for her as well. And I said, Sandy, what can I tell these students who are about to go out into this world and find a job? Like, how do they do it? Because again, even then, obviously I didn't have YouTube. I had a box of VHS tapes when I started. But even still, you have to have the initiative. That's the first of all. You got to be enthusiastic. And you got to know what you're talking about. If you're going to go be in the news business, even if it's behind the scenes, you got to be knowledgeable of what's going on. If you're just spending all your time on TikTok watching people dance, you don't know what's going on in the world. And so both of them, both Sandy and Al, my two mentors, they said every single student who wants to be in the news business, whether it's radio, TV, newspaper, whatever you want to do, behind the scenes, in front of the camera, whatever, every single day you have also got to be a student, even after you leave this campus, a student of news. Read the Wall Street Journal. Read the New York Times. You've got to read the Tennessean. And again, I realize nobody wants to read a paper anymore. You got it all right there in the palm of your hands. Stay up on current events, because I can tell you right now, when you go into an interview with any news director, you're going to be hit with a question of what's going on in the world today. Can you, name the United States Department of Agriculture Secretary? Can you name any of the cabinet members? As a matter of fact, and that used to scare me, because I could go, I can name the president and the vice president, and then it was crickets. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm not doing my own homework. So I got to figure that out. So you don't ever stop being a student. The other big deal that they really drove home with me yesterday is a work ethic. A work ethic, and look, we dealt with this 30, 40 years ago, and we deal with it today. TV and radio are non-traditional jobs. There is no such thing as a 9 to 5. It just doesn't happen. You're either going to go in at 3 in the morning and do the morning show and get off at noon, or you're going to go in at 1:30 in the afternoon and get off at 11 o'clock at night. You may or may not get a dinner break. And guess what? News is 24/7. Do you know how many Christmases I've worked? How many Thanksgivings I've worked? Know going into it. If you want a 9 to 5 job, go be a banker. Find something else, because I'm just going to tell you, it does not exist. Now, we used to all fight for the dayside reporter. So there is a sort of version of that dayside, but even then, if you're dayside, chances are it's still a 9 to 10 hour day, because you got to be there for a story meeting in the morning, and then you got to stay through the news. Let's say you're the lead story at 6 o'clock, and you got there at 8:30 in the morning. Well, you can't go. Well, oh my gosh, I came in at 8:30. It's now 4:30. I got to go. No, you don't. You stay through the newscast. So know that going in. And always be able to come to that story meeting. And when I say story meeting, every newsroom in America, I don't care, small market, large market, CBS, NPT, every single newsroom has a morning story meeting where every single reporter is to come into that room with a workable story idea for that day. Do you understand what that means? I mean, that was the biggest pressure I dealt with, because we all live in this world. Well, yeah, we can go out with our phone and shoot a little something and put it on our Facebook page. No, when you've got a producer trying to fill 22 minutes in the evening newscast, you can't say, oh, well, let me go call this person. Oh, they can do that story next Thursday. No, you have to do your legwork before you come into that story meeting and be able to turn that story that day. If it falls through, you better be able to go to your next one. It's a tough job and it's a lot of pressure. And it is one of the reasons, again, I mean, I'm confessing to you, after 30-something years of doing news and morning shows and anchor the evening news, and I was a weekend anchor at WKRN for about 6 years, and I've been doing Tennessee Crossroads for 26 years. Now that is a little different. The Tennessee Crossroads is a weekly show, so it doesn't have the deadlines that an evening, a WKRN, SMV, TVF would have. But you still have to be able to come in and produce a story a day. At RFD-TV, where I work now, because we're the agriculture network, we do 5 hours live straight every day, just like CNN, Fox. We're like a headline news for 5 straight hours. Everything we do has an ag connection. And so we get a lot of our stories from the different agriculture organizations, farm bureaus, and things like that. But I still have to go out and cover stories sometimes, or cover these big events. I mean, I just spent 2 days in Washington, D.C., last week, because again, the United States Department of Ag secretary was making some waves in America. And of course now agriculture, especially after COVID, we all know, again, if you're separated from the farm and you didn't get raised on a farm, you learned during COVID that your food doesn't magically appear on Walmart store shelves, that a farmer has to produce it. And so they are revamping what's going on in agriculture today. So they sent me to Washington, D.C. to cover that. So it's a business where, yes, now I'm in a niche market. I work for a cable channel that focuses on agriculture. You find your passion. That was my passion. I was raised on a farm. It just made sense. So you figure out, do you want to do sports? Do you want to do ag reporting? You've got something that makes your heart sing. And you find that. And it may be being a general assignment reporter. You may get a kick out of going to cover a city council meeting and find out what those politicians are doing and the decisions they're making. And that's where you got to focus on those meetings, even though they can be excruciatingly boring, because politicians want to hear themselves speak. Look at the end product. They're making decisions that impact your life. And so that's what you have to think about when you're covering things like that. So, and you got to figure out, just like I asked my friend here in the back, you got to figure out how to make that meeting look exciting. You got to have video to go along with, other than just people sitting in a room. You go find whatever it is they're talking about, and you get video of it. I'm going to touch on AI. I feel like I'm going to get some questions about this, but I'm going to go ahead and touch on it for a second, because it's one of the things that Sandy, the news director at News Channel 5, told me. With artificial intelligence doing a lot of the work for us right now, you have to realize that as a reporter, you still have to be a reporter. You cannot be lazy and let AI do it for you. And the most important thing she says is, number one, they do not allow artificial intelligence in that newsroom to originate any content. You still have to make contacts. It's all about relationships. And you go find your stories. Now, she said AI can help us create a little sexy headline, maybe do a little something else fancy with the script if you're in a hurry. But she said we always acknowledge when a story has AI in it. Because right now, people are still a little sketchy of AI, because it makes it look so real. But if it is not your original content, your audience needs to know that. So that, again, I'm skimming over the surface, as you can imagine, of 44 years in this business. I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. You saw at the end of that, it has allowed me to interview presidents and Dolly Parton, and it's been an incredible career. But it also has I don't mean to cry, but I mean, obviously, I don't have a family. I don't have kids. I don't have pets. Because this schedule is rough, and the money isn't always good. That's the other thing you got to realize. You hear about the people in television that make the 6 digits a year. 98% of us do not. Do not. My first job paid $12,000 a year. So just realize if you're getting into it for the money and you think it's going to be an easy job because you think writing and you can run a camera, that it's going to be an easy job. It is not an easy job. Questions? Anybody? No questions? You got one, okay.
Yes. So when did you know that you wanted to be a storyteller?
That's very good. Well, again, I've made the joke that my mother prayed I better get paid for talking. But I knew at 16 years old, like I say, I had a passion for talking and asking questions, and I had gotten into, it's called Boys State, Girls State in Louisiana down at LSU. I feel certain that Tennessee has something similar, but it's where 2 kids from every high school in the entire state are sent to LSU, and you live on campus and you run the state. So in other words, you hire a governor, a lieutenant governor, and then you got to hire a mayor, and you got to hire a district attorney, and so you literally learn how the world works at 16 years old. And I'll never forget, my daddy wanted me to be a lawyer. He said, well, because you will argue with a cardboard box, so just go be a lawyer and get paid for it. So I remember going to Boys State, Girls State, and out of the 300 people there, I was elected Attorney General, and you had to run a political campaign and do all that. And so I was elected as Attorney General, the state's lawyer. And at the end of that week, I went back to my dad, and I was crying, and I said, there's nothing more I want to do than make you happy. But I know now that is not what I want to do. And I said, I want to be a newscaster. I said, more specifically, I want to be a sportscaster. And of course, again, everybody looked at me like I had 2 heads because there weren't women in sports back then. But, and he just looked at me and he said, well, I want you to be happy. I don't care if you want to be a basket weaver, but I want you to be happy. And so that was the light bulb moment. And like I said, I literally went to college, majored in radio, television, management. At the time, they had different disciplines. You could do film, you could do journalism, you could do PR. I did management because when I was 17 years old, I thought, well, when I get too old, fat, and wrinkly to be on camera, then I'm going to run the station. I'm going to be the general manager. I learned I don't want to be the general manager. I was promoted several years ago to news director, and I've learned I'm a much better worker bee than I am a boss, because I don't want to be ugly to anybody, and if you come to me and you ask for a day off, I'm just going to say yeah. Because, oh, you want a day off? Go. Without looking at the schedule, realizing 2 other people have already asked for the day off, and you can't take it. So, yeah, I didn't have the backbone to be a general manager or news director. Yes, sir.
You told us about the story about how you approached, the person smoking the cigarette in the news.
And then my first news interview, yeah.
You sounded confident, to us, but did you ever have any little doubts along the way that you could perform and be on camera and do what you do throughout your career?
It's very interesting that you bring that up. I was so confident, and I really don't think I was cocky. I was just so confident because I had already worked at the campus TV station. So I was already doing our little weekend newscast as well as doing a little radio broadcast. And to be honest, I was just so bored with class, and I was just ready to go do what I knew I was put on earth to do. Now, when I look back at that time, the guy that was the news director at the time, I didn't know him from Adam's House Cat. Because remember, I thought I was going to go talk to the sports director. And so it never entered my mind to do any homework on the news director. So I didn't even know who I was going to go talk to. Come to find out, he was like a bigwig. I mean, like he had just gotten off the plane from interviewing Ronald Reagan. I mean, And again, y'all are too young to care about that. But you know, I mean, to be on Air Force One with a president doing a one-on-one interview, but yet you're still the news director in Monroe, Louisiana. I mean, he was a big deal. But his family, just like me going back home, his family was there. But he traveled all over the world doing award-winning stories. I didn't know it. But see, to me, that was a God thing, because had I known that before I got sidetracked, before I got booted down the hall and realized that the sports director was only going to let me get his coffee, because that's all he thought women were going to, do in his sports room, it didn't enter my mind to do my homework on Ken Booth. So yeah, I had all the confidence in the world. Another funny story about him, though, and this, again, I realize now not hardly anybody here wants to be on camera, but in case you do, this is kind of a funny story. Obviously, when I got hired, I was still in school, so I was working at night. I would go in at 5 in the evening and work through the 10 o'clock news, and I basically was a glorified gopher. I was just happy to be in the newsroom. And again, you didn't have computers. You had slides like the, when you watch the news, when you go home and watch the news tonight, the character generator, the little graphic that goes over the anchor's shoulder that matches whatever the story is, whether it's a wreck or a shooting or whatever. There's a graphic over the shoulder that kind of drives the story home. Well, when I started, you literally had to pull a slide out of a projector, like an old-fashioned. That's what it did. I had to go pick slides for every story for the 10 o'clock news. That was my main job. But guess what? I was a sophomore in college. I was the only student in my entire class that had a job in TV. I was just happy to be there. So I'll never forget, after a few weeks, again, I'm bored, let me be on camera, let me do this. So I just kept bugging that news director, let me do something. So he finally says, I'm going to let you do the little 10-second tease. That was 10 or 15 seconds. It would air about 9:30, 9:40 in the evening, and it would tease the top story coming up on the 10 o'clock news. Well, normally the main anchor, the 10 o'clock anchor, would do that. But he said, I'm going to let you do the tease tonight. Well, of course, I'm beside myself. I'm calling my mom and daddy, because remember, I'm from there, so all my family's there. So I'm calling everybody, hey, I'm going to be on the news. It's only going to be 10 seconds. Don't blink, you'll miss it, but I'm going to be on TV. Do the tease, and it is, and I do it just like this. New tonight at 10, 2 people die in a plane crash in Rayville. Because I got my pageant face going on, okay? Because I'm on TV. Liked it got fired on the spot, because you don't smile when 2 people die in a plane crash. That moment was a defining moment when people tell me, and again, I promise you I'm not being arrogant, but when people tell me, you're a personable, conversational anchor. You don't sound like a news anchor. You sound like you're talking to me in my living room. That, my friends, from 1981, made me that anchor. Because that reminded me, he didn't fire me. He just said, you pay attention to what you're reading. Because you are in the living room with that person telling them what is happening in their community. And you do that one more time where I feel like you've not read it in advance and know what you're talking about, you will be fired. So in 1981, that was a defining moment for me. Thank God it was 10 seconds and I didn't lose my job. Anyway, another question?
Where do you get your ideas for your stories?
Now again, realize for the last 11 years, I've worked for RFD-TV. And by the way, RFD stands for Rural Free Delivery. Back in the early 1900s, Congress passed a law forcing the Postal Service to deliver mail to those who lived in rural America, out in the country, because they didn't want to do it. It was too expensive. It was called the Rural Free Delivery Act, if you're wondering why we're called RFD. So, I now get all of my stories. Again, I get passionate about what I'm talking about because I think our farmers and ranchers are not recognized enough. 2% of the world, farmers and ranchers, 2%. Feed and clothe, 98%. Okay, so I do things that lift up our farmers and ranchers. So oftentimes, I find a story when I'm on a story. That is the biggest thing that happens. And that happens with Tennessee Crossroads a lot too. I can be on a story shooting and they're like, oh my gosh, I know this person that does this, or I know that does that. So you can always, not always, but you often can find a story when you're on a story. The other thing you can do, again, with all the tools you have in your toolbox now, social media can be very helpful with that in finding people, finding story ideas, but it goes back to make relationships and build contacts. Whether you want to just be a storyteller and feature story person, or whether you want to be the next investigative reporter on 60 Minutes, it's all about building relationships, and that's a great way to find a story.
How long does it take you to prep for a story?
Oh, okay. Oh, that's good. You're right. You told me to talk about that. Well, prepping for a story can be from 10 minutes to 3 days, depending on what it is. But I do advise you, whatever it takes to do that before you go to a story, do it, okay? And don't take everything you read on social media as the gospel. So don't assume you know everything about that story when you go into it. Because again, somebody had to enter that information on there, so there's a chance it was a mistake, or it was a chance that they intentionally put out there what they wanted out there. So always double check it with your source. But so, and here's the other little trick I do. And this is not the way a lot of people do it, but I'm just going to tell you the way I do it. A lot of people will do a pre-interview, and a lot of people who are interviewed want to do a pre-interview. I discourage it. I really do. And here's why. If you sit there and ask everybody the questions ahead of time, then when you're actually doing the interview, you got the best answer on the first go-round because it was natural. Now they're thinking about it too hard. And they're thinking about what they said and what they meant to say, And then they go, well, as I told you earlier, well, no, we weren't recording. So you didn't tell me earlier. Now, every once in a while, you do get somebody that just absolutely will not go on camera till you give them kind of an idea of what you're going to talk about. But I don't like giving people questions ahead of time. I can give you an outline. I give you the angle. I mean, I'm not trying to ambush anybody. Again, I'm not 60 Minutes. I'm not going to ambush you, about how you're growing soybeans. But I really like that natural, organic, let's just have a conversation. And that's what I tell everybody now, is I'm not here to trip you up. It is okay to say I don't know. And that's the other thing. When you're doing an interview with somebody, let them know, unless you're live. If you're live, it's out there, okay? But if you're recording something, let them know. If you mess up or you don't like your answer, we can start over. That's what editing is for. Oh, I forgot to tell you, to that point, Al Tompkins, my mentor, he said a really good practice for you guys, and I'd never done this. I'd never thought, he didn't tell me to do this back then when I first became a reporter for him. He said, take whatever newspaper it is, if you want to do the Tennessean, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, whatever, take the top story, that above the fold story, which I don't know how you refer to that on a phone, but anyway, the lead story, and pretend like it's your assignment for the day. And you read that story, put the paper down, get up, set up your phone on a tripod, or come in here, and you give a minute and a half, minute 15, a minute and a half, because y'all do understand that too. Here's your biggest challenge in the entire career of television. It's what you don't say in a minute and 15-second story and still make that story accurate. Remember that 3-hour city council meeting I was telling you about, or school board meeting? It doesn't matter that it was 3 hours. You still get a minute 15. So that's why so many politicians and leaders and CEOs, they get upset. Oh, you took me out of context. You didn't use my whole soundbite. Well, we couldn't. Your soundbite was 4 minutes and 20 seconds. I had a minute 15 for the story. So that's going to be the biggest challenge if any of you want to be reporters. It's what not to say and still be accurate.
How did you handle stories throughout your career where you were less than enthusiastic about the subject matter?
Oh, that's good. I'll never forget. Another funny story. Anybody here see the movie Dukes of Hazzard? You have? Dukes of Hazzard with Jessica Simpson and anyway. All right, yeah, okay, I'm that old. But anyway, it was a movie, and it was shot in Baton Rouge. And I'll never forget, I had been asking to go cover it because they had taken over, they being the film company, had taken over houses and streets and, made them into sets. And so I made friends, I thought, with the publicist of the movie and kept saying, hey, can I go cover this? Nope, closed set. The next day, hey, can I go cover them shooting, in this area? Nope, closed set. I mean, every answer was just, no, you're not going to go. So a couple of weeks goes by, and then all of a sudden I'm watching the news, and I promise to get to your point, watching the news of the competition, and they have a story from the movie set with one of their reporters. I go ballistic. Now, I'm usually a kitten, but boy, I was mad. I called that publicist. I said, what do you mean? He said he knew the guy that owned the property. We didn't let him do it. He was already there and gone by the time we realized he was on set. So the reporter from the competition had snuck in. So I wasn't as mad. The next day, that same publicist calls me. Because again, they're shooting a movie in Baton Rouge. We're not known for having a bunch of people that stand around and want to be extras every day in a movie on a weekday that can just take off work and go spend hours standing in a movie. So they had planned this parade scene with Burt Reynolds and all these people. Well, they'd had like 300 people sign up to be extras. Again, if it's a parade, you got to have a street lined with people, right? Like 10 people showed up because it was cold and it was not parade day. It was not parade weather. And so no, hardly anybody showed up. So that publicist called me, and he said, how would you like to be a reporter in the movie? I'm like, really? And he said, this is to make up for, you got shut out, on the story. He said, and we just need, the director says if I can find a reporter, he can put those 10 people, he can shoot it to where it looks like those 10 people look like a crowd. You do it, and a reporter makes it look like it's a big deal. And he said, we'll let you be you. Like, you can say your name and, y'all's call letters and everything. I go to my news director. Now I'm getting to your point. I go to my news director, and we're just about to go into our little morning story meeting where we have to, pitch stories. And I say, I've got an opportunity. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. We're going to get to do a story. I get to be on camera. We get to use WBRZ mic flag. I mean, I'm just thinking, this is wonderful news. My news director looks at me. He goes, no, you're not going to go do that. He says, we've got a slumlord over here that won't get the rats out of that apartment building. You need to go do that. Excuse me? When we've got 3 other reporters here, one who loves to go do that, loves to go take down a slumlord. You're telling me I've got to go do that? He goes, yeah. He said, I ain't worried about Dukes of Hazzard and them Hollywood people. Now, don't do this. You students don't do this in your first job. I got up and I walked out and I went down to the general manager's office because I said, here's the deal. You're right. Even if I didn't have the opportunity to be in a Hollywood film as a reporter, it's still not, I don't want to do the slumlord guy. It's almost like it was intentional. Again, we had 3 other reporters that day that they loved doing that controversy, negative. I mean, they eat, live, and breathe that. So I'm like, no, this guy was just wanting to get under my skin. Because again and again, I would come in every day with a story idea. It was never hard news. It was always either tug on your heartstrings, health related, or, yeah. And so again, he got tired of me coming in with softball stories. But so I went to the GM and I said, do you see the value of me being me of WBRZ on a film that's going to be out in the theater in a year? He goes, yeah, I do. He said, I want you to do it. I want you to do it. He said, but I really can't go against my news director. And I said, I'm going to go do it. I mean, that's how serious I was about it. Because I said, this is crazy. And so he said, well, let's come together. He said, you go do it, but you have to take a vacation day. You got to burn a vacation day. So be it. So be it. I run up to little Zachary, Louisiana, just north of Baton Rouge. Believe it or not, they were, because normally, I don't know how many of y'all have been involved in movies or TV shows, but they can spend all day doing one scene. So I was prepared that it was just going to take all day. I get up there, honey, we run it 3 times. I interview Burt Reynolds. And, but I didn't use the mic flag because I was so mad that they made me take a vacation day that I didn't even take a WBRZ mic flag because I was so mad. So I think I was WXYZ. Anyway, when y'all go home tonight, what are y'all going to rent? Dukes of Hazzard. All right, of course, I look funny. It was 100 years ago, so I look funny, but it's me interviewing Burt Reynolds. And again, don't blink. But the point being, there are days when you have to go cover the slumlord and the rat-infested house or the school board meeting or whatever. And when you're first starting out and you're a general assignment reporter, no other way to say it. You just suck it up and go do it. Because you have to prove yourself. It's good to cut your teeth on it. Again, when you start looking at, all right, why am I covering it? Because decisions made here are impacting our community. And then what I would normally do, when I was forced to go cover stories I didn't want to do, I would focus on the person affected, which most news directors are going to make you do anyway. You don't just go cover the meeting. You go find somebody and put a face to who is impacted. So that's how I made myself get through it on the days that I didn't get up, walk out, go to the general manager. Again, don't do that. But I was mad. So yeah, I still, matter of fact, yesterday, got a residual check for $6.97 from Dukes of Hazzard. And that was, that movie was 20 years ago. But I still get a residual, because I'm a SAG-AFTRA member now because of that. But no, it's funny. But so I've been a news anchor in 14 movies because of getting that role in Dukes of Hazzard and getting my SAG-AFTRA card. I've now been a news anchor in 14 movies.
Who would you stop and watch on the screen any place, anytime?
Say again?
Who would you stop and watch on the screen any place, anytime?
Oh, wow. That is a very good question. And again, this goes back to the world we live in now because you can flip around and I can pick people on YouTube that I want to watch or I can do whatever. So, and it depends on if it would be local or national or whatever. I mean, back in the day, people y'all don't even care about. Again, because I'm a storyteller, I love this guy named Charles Kuralt. He was just and again, if you go back and Google, you can find his stuff. Just the most incredible storyteller and writer and a delivery that just, oh my gosh, he was so easy to listen to. So I love doing that. And what I do now, and it's not necessarily because I like him, and this is going to sound terrible for somebody that's been in the news business for 44 years, but I'm going to answer honestly just because I don't know any other way to answer. I don't watch news in the evening anymore, which I don't know if anybody watches news in real time anymore. If you're going to watch the news, you watch it whenever you want to, on demand. Well, I'm that person too. And because I get up at 3:45 a.m. every day, I get up and I do my coffee, do my little quiet time, and then I go get on the Peloton. And on that Peloton for 1 hour is where I get my news. And I watch David Muir for my evening news. I just watched it at 5 a.m. in the morning. And then here's the crazy thing. And again, I'm just being honest with you. And you have to understand, I'm at the point, I'm not building my career anymore. I've done everything I wanted to do. My goal was to be in Nashville. A lot of people want to live in New York or LA or Atlanta or Dallas or, whatever. My goal was to make it from Podunk, Hoochie Cooch, Louisiana to Nashville, and I did. So now, after I watch the evening news at 5 o'clock in the morning, I spend the remaining 30 minutes, and I think this is just as important to the answer to that question, learning something new. You have to understand, when I graduated college and started, even though I took an editing class, I really didn't know how to edit. Editors were the size of dorm room refrigerators. I guess I could have made sure there wasn't a black hole, but I always knew, again, in 1981, that I was going to have a crew, that I was going to have a videographer, I was going to have a lighting guy, I was going to have a sound guy, and either that videographer or an editor who's just sitting back at the station waiting on us to get back with video was going to edit it. I just needed to be able to write and look decent on camera. And that's all I cared about until about 15 years ago, I discovered that if I couldn't be, because you people can shoot a story and edit it in the palm of your hands, that if I was still going to have a job in this business and compete with young people and still be relevant, I, by golly, was going to have to teach myself how to edit. And when I tell you, for 3 weeks, I cried because I thought my brain's not wired that way. And I watched every video I could on that Peloton every morning. And then I'd get off that Peloton and I'd go back to that computer, and I could not do it. And I thought, my career's over. I just can't do it anymore. And I don't know what happened. I guess God felt sorry for me. But one day, I got off that Peloton, went back to that computer, and all of a sudden it clicked. It just clicked. And now it's like I keep trying. I don't say I'm next level, but I keep trying to go to the next level. So that's what I do now. And the other 30 minutes on that Peloton is I try to learn something that's going to help me in my business. Did I answer that question or go too far off? Anybody else? Are y'all ready to go? You got one?
What is your favorite thing to do as a reporter?
Favorite thing to do as a reporter? Well, my first response is I like to write. I still like to write. There's just a creative part in me. Matter of fact, I even have a cookbook coming out in November that it's not just a turn, because I have become obsessed with cooking and baking and decorating cookies, but it's not just a book of recipes. It's a story. If you look up author Rick Bragg, who was a writer forever at Atlanta Constitution and Southern Living and all that kind of stuff, it's kind of patterned after him. It's a lot of my stories and the food that I grew up with and the stories surrounding them. So my first response is writing. But to fishtail off of what we just talked about, I now get the biggest kick out of shooting video and editing, and to see what I can do and see how I can make it look. Because we've got some amazing, one of the videographers at RFD worked on Game of Thrones. He was a photographer on Game of Thrones. Big time. And so he shoots and edits our show called Farm Her, where we focus on female farmers. it is something out of National Geographic. I mean, I don't care if you don't like farming or horses or cattle or whatever. It is unreal. This guy is so good. So I literally go back maybe to the other question. I watch that show a lot because I'm trying to learn from him, because he does things with a camera and video and editing that I swear I don't see in movies sometimes. So, so I've really gotten in to the editing part. Anybody else?
What was your favorite episode to do on Crossroads?
On Tennessee Crossroads, you know, I had a funny feeling you were going to ask that. It may have been, you saw me skydiving in the video. That was a Tennessee Crossroads story. It was also an Opry backstage story. There was a network in town called the Nashville Network, and it carried the Grand Ole Opry, and my job working for them was to do stories on Grand Ole Opry members, but not singing. I mean, we all knew you could sing. You wouldn't be a Grand Ole Opry member, right? And so we're like, well, what else do you do? And so I'll never forget, a member, the lead guitarist for Diamond Rio, his passion was skydiving. And I swore I'd never do it. But I did, and Tennessee Crossroads wanted it too. And so I jumped out of a perfectly good airplane. And as you saw, the funny story about that, again, I don't ever have a normal story. There's never just a period, right? My goggles, if you go back and watch that little video, when you jump out of the plane, you have goggles on because you fall at 160, 180 miles an hour, something like that. So you have to wear goggles or your your eyelids turn inside out. And so of course, my goggles come off. So my eyelids are inside out. And so, you go through this crash course, for lack of a better word, to learn how to, because you're supposed to pull your own ripcord. You're supposed to save yourself. But it's a tandem jump, so this guy's on my back. But I mean, thank God he was, because my eyeballs are coming out of my head. And so I do nothing. I mean, I'm just plunging to my death at 180 miles an hour. And of course, they're filming, a guy's got a little, the very beginning of GoPros, I guess. He's got a camera on his little helmet, and he's falling with us. And so he's catching the whole thing on camera. And but by the time my tandem guy realizes I'm doing nothing and that we're about to die, he pulls a ripcord. And but it wasn't almost too late. Don't let me exaggerate. Don't do that in reporting. It was not almost too late. It was too late to have a soft landing. That's the accurate way to say that. So we tumbled and rolled, and that it was funny because when I got through with that, it freaked me out. I mean, it really did freak me out. And I also ride motorcycles. If you saw that, I do a little motorcycle travel show, and I had started riding motorcycles and had bought a motorcycle and never told my father. And I'll never forget, I got out of that plane. I was working at WKRN at the time, too, full-time, not just TNN. I was doing all this. Again, now you know why I don't have a family or pets. So I'm working at WKRN. I go into my boss, and I said, I need the next 2 days off. I'm like, I got to go home and see my family, hug, kiss them, So I jump out of a perfectly good airplane, get on a motorcycle, drive home, and drive up to my daddy's house, and he's like, what? Have you completely lost your ever-loving mind? And he's like, don't you ever tell me, number one, that you're going to jump out of an airplane, and don't you ever tell me when you're going to get on that motorcycle. You tell me when you get home. Do you know my father followed me from Tallulah, Louisiana, back to Nashville, Tennessee on that motorcycle because he was scared to death? I'm like, Daddy, I promise you. I mean, I know I shouldn't have kept it from you, but I've been riding now for like 7 or 8 years. But he followed me all the way in his truck.
Did you ever skydive after that?
Huh?
Did you ever skydive?
Heck to the no. Oh, No, they had, again, you'll have to go back. I think Crossroads, even though, if you go to the Tennessee Crossroads the website, I think that story's still up there. Now, you realize, once everything went to HD, a lot of the stories got lost. So I don't know if that one's up there or not. But if you go look at it, or even look at that video that I sent Diana, you have to see the guy peel my fingers off. Because what you do is you get out of the plane and you actually hold on to the wing. So I really don't know how he got me out of the plane other than he's on my back, so he's kind of dragging me. and I'm holding onto the wing as you're, flying at 20,000 feet. And I wasn't going to let go. I wasn't going to let go. I just thought this was the most stupid thing on the planet. Why would anybody do this, and why do you think this is fun? So he had to pry my hands off the wing. So that would be my most fun. What else have I done? I've kayaked on the Piney River, and it's just always been a lot of fun stories with them. Then I did a story on mounted patrol with Metro Police Department, how they keep their horses and what they put the horses through to make them crowd ready. So that was a fun one. But yeah, Tennessee Crossroads for 26 years. That show was going to be on the air, they thought, about a year, maybe 2. And it's now in its 27th year. All right.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me. You've made my day. Made my day for remembering. She asked me, it was back in the spring, wasn't it? It was back in the spring, and she remembered, and because I'm actually moving home to Louisiana next Friday. And I said, if you still want me, we got to get it before September 12th. She's like, okay. So thank you for having me. I hope I didn't talk a nose off a moose. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you. Thank you. Anxious to see what we got.